Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unearth with Shelly Hughes podcast. I'm Shelly Hughes. In this podcast, we talk about the wins, the challenges, the lessons learned about running and growing a business. I like to really dive deep into the lessons, the celebrations of what it takes to grow a passionate and profitable brand. And today we are part two of Dad Chats. And in our last episode, we really talked about lessons about wealth and growing wealth. And I think we dove into a lot of kind of the mindset that you had as a kid, the mindset that you had as a young adult, and you know, getting into some of these new technologies and some of these new books, like Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, just how it changed your mindset about money.
Hmm.
But today, I really want to dive into how can we talk to our children about money. Um, you know, as many people who have kids think about, I think before we have kids, we want to build wealth for ourselves, right? We want to have that dream life we always thought about. We want to, we want to obviously provide for ourselves, but just be able to live the lifestyle we've always wanted it. And I think when you start to have kids, that ambition and the source of that ambition shifts a little bit of I'm doing this for something so much bigger
Right.
than what I originally thought.
Right. It's not only for me.
It's not only
Right.
for me anymore, right? And, with that, you think about money a little bit differently. You think about, okay, how can I give my kids a lifestyle that maybe I didn't have? But two, it's how can I prep my children up to, maybe do some of the things that I never did when it came to money, teach them some of the money mistakes that I made in my past, and so they don't have to make the same ones, and just have them shift, establish a mindset around money that is really healthy, that I think a huge amount of our population, even as adults, don't have.
Yes.
So today I kind of want to talk about how to talk to your kids about money, how to, instill some of these values in them at a
Hmm.
really early age. And I guess we can kind of start with how, your story with your two kids, me included, how how maybe you talked to us about money growing up. What are some of the values that you tried to instill in us around money and finances and really independence? I think mom did, I think she influenced us
Oh, yeah.
heavily
Yep.
as well.
Hmm.
You guys didn't even get married until later in life. So I think, just having two parents who were in
More
very
mature.
much
Right.
mature, very independent, and very individually financially successful. I think I remember from a very early age seeing that, especially as a woman. I didn't see, I saw my mom going out to work every day,
Right.
right? I heard stories of her younger years, before she got married, going on these amazing cruises by herself because and her friends, just because she was single and she was making a good amount of money,
Could afford to. Right.
and she could
Yep.
afford to, right? So
Hmm.
I think she showed me what it can take to really think independently, especially as a woman, and be able to take responsibility of your own finances. But how do you feel like you translated a lot of the values that you had around money to your kids?
As a family, it's not. You're just busy living, right? So as your family grows up, it's not a subject of conversation with a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, but it's a lifestyle that they absorb. Talk a little bit about in the first video where you can grow up in a family where your dad and mom just have a 9 to 5 job and they go to work every day and they come back, or you can grow up in a family that runs a business, runs a restaurant, or runs a foundry, or runs whatever business, and that lifestyle is different. Children grow up in an environment that becomes normal to them. a piece of advice that was given to me that I really took to heart was the best thing that you can give your children is a good example. That good example is is an example of just your general lifestyle. You want to show that you work diligently, you go to work every day, but you don't frivolously spend money. It's a controlled lifestyle where you're living comfortably, you have the resources to spend on your kids and splurge on them for dance lessons and horse riding lessons and whatever. You always want to live within your means. I think that's the root of what we tried to give you was just that stable financial lifestyle. It wasn't until much later that the technology advanced and whatnot that we could really branch out into more specific investment opportunities that like the stock market and whatnot. But it's basically you got to learn no matter how much you're making is to live within your means. Live as well as you can, but live within your means so that you're putting away something for a rainy day, something for retirement. You know, that's the lesson that you give your all your children. No two children are alike. You can have siblings where one's successful and one's working their tail off all their life. How did they get different lessons from the same family? No two people are alike. You, as an example, you have always been, from the time you were a kid, a type A personality. You were driven, you were self-reliant, and you just did what you needed to do from the time you were born. There are people like that. You got A type people and B type people and C type people, and they live very different lifestyles. It takes all of them to make the world go around. Everybody plays an important role. It's just where do you find your niche in life and how do you make your way through it? But you've got to find your niche in life. You're not going to live in mom's basement for your whole life.
Right.
So
I think that's another thing that I learned from you guys is, with my kids too, is I mean, I got a job when I was 15. And I don't exactly remember why or how that came about, but what do you think? Why do you think I did that? And did that, was it independence? Was it, you guys saying, hey, I'm not giving you any more money? What was that? And
that was you.
yeah.
That was absolutely your personality. I think it was selling knives, wasn't it? Wasn't that your first gig?
No. Before
What was that?
then, my first gig, I was a shampoo girl. That was my first gig. And I might have been not even too old to be have been legally hired. And then my second gig was I think I was a waitress. That
Oh
was my
yeah,
second
at
gig.
the
And
nursing home.
then at the nursing home. And then my third gig was I sold those Cutco knives. I did. And for that one summer I did that, I made the amount of money that,
Oh,
any
absolutely.
kid
Yep.
would be pumped about. But
Yep.
and that's always interesting. And I don't always relate to other entrepreneurs because they grew up in an entrepreneurial family. They, their dad was a business owner maybe, or both their parents were business owners. And Dan Martell says this very well, is that business owners and entrepreneurs a lot of times are addicted to chaos just because they grew up with it their entire lives. And I don't feel like I am necessarily addicted to chaos in any way. Because I think, growing up, we were a typical, like
Right.
American,
Very typical.
middle class family, right? And
Yep.
so what do you think, was it, conversations that I had with you? What was it, do you think, that made me kind of divert from really 99% of the people that I went to high school with?
Well, I think actually I think it was two things. Both of them are based on your personality, your type A personality. But the two things were you got into dance classes from the time you were young. Right now, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to sell yourself. You've got to put yourself out there, and it's a mindset that 90% of the people are not comfortable with. They are not comfortable in their own skin, right? You going through dance was a way to become used to being comfortable in your own skin, so to speak, to put yourself out on the stage and present yourself to an audience. And I think that went a long way to making you comfortable into going into business.
Mm.
And the same thing with when you were selling Cutco knives. That was knocking on
It was
doors
sales. Yeah.
and doing
Calling.
you were selling, right? That's like selling used cars. You're selling a product and you've got to sell yourself, right? And that at a young age really instilled that um, entrepreneurial spirit where you weren't afraid to put yourself out there. If you can't do that, then maybe a 9 to 5 job is what you're cut out to do. And even at that, a lot of people, they take a 9 to 5 job and they just want to do something for 8 hours and put it down and go home and come back and do it again for 8 hours. And they don't want the responsibility. They don't want
The risk.
the risk. The world needs them. So everybody has to mold their personality as best they can, but otherwise fit their personality into the job that fits them the best. You were always one to put yourself out front and center and take the risk. And then I always knew that you would be successful. You weren't the lawyer that I always thought you might be, but
Thank God. Yeah, I mean, even
she could talk a good game when she was about 5 years old, believe me.
even selling those knives, I felt so dumb so many times. I got rejected so many times. And, I think sales is such a hard game, but especially as a small business, I know a lot of business owners where they got in the game because they love their craft. They
Right.
love what they do. They might be a woodworker, right? And they love woodworking. And for example, maybe they're an accountant and they work for this big accounting firm and they don't feel appreciated and they love numbers and they love what they do and that kind of thing, and they decide, screw this accounting firm, I'm going to do my own thing because I'll have all this freedom. And they start their own business and they are really good at accounting, but
They're not good at business.
they're not good at sales.
Right.
Right. And I think that's one of the biggest things that especially small businesses learn very quickly is that you don't open a business to harness your craft if you're not willing to have a partner that is on the business side. So I think what book is this? Yeah, it's E-Myth. They say that there are multiple kinds of entrepreneurs. There's the technician, right? And that's the accountant who just wants to do accounting. And maybe if you are the technician and you're not willing to get a partner in the business, maybe most likely 9 to 5 is exactly what you should be doing. And that's okay. Then there's a manager, right? They like to manage people. And then there's a true entrepreneur and owner. And that's kind of the visionary. So there might be a fourth one. I can't remember off the top of my head, but unless you're all 3 or 4 of those things,
Right.
you need to make sure that you have complements to that for your business to be
Right.
successful. And I think I started this business because I'm really good at marketing. I'm really good at the craft.
And you're good at
Um,
selling yourself, presenting yourself out there.
but what I realized is that I loved growing a business more than even marketing, right? Than the craft. And so that's where I think that's why I love business so much is because yes, I have this thing I'm very passionate about is the craft, but what I actually love doing is growing something from nothing,
Right.
right? And it's just and then the managerial part within that just all kind of goes hand in hand.
As you start a business, almost all startup businesses are sole proprietors, and you're a one-man band. You're chief cook and bottle washer, right? But you soon realize that as your business grows, you need help. And one of the traits of a successful business is the person who's got the vision of the business knows that he's not the best accountant, or he's not the best financial guy, or he's not the best at doing the day-to-day jobs required in a business. But what he does is he hires the best people that he can find to do that. And a lot of people are, you know, type B people, don't like to surround themselves with people who are smarter than them. Where what you have to do is swallow your pride and know that your own talents may be in this area, but you've got to have talent in these other areas that you've got to fulfill with different people, right?
Yeah.
And you know, you don't want to hire somebody to do your accounting that isn't as good at it as you are, right? Because you're no good,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You've got to hire the best accountant that you can find, or the best marketing guy you can find, or the best technology guy you can find, right? Elon Musk doesn't do that. The big entrepreneurs hire the guys to do it in their name,
Right. Right.
right? So
And
you've got to be willing to delegate those authorities and gather the people around you that have the same goal but bring their own strengths.
I think that's that come going back to, how to talk to your kids about money and business and wealth is there's not very many things about gentle parenting that I totally agree with on many levels, but some of the things I do agree with is just constantly instilling self-confidence into your kids.
Oh
So
yeah.
so for example, instead of if Tucker, my 3-year-old comes to me and he shows me a painting he did at school, instead of saying like, "Oh, I love this. It looks so beautiful. I love all the colors that you used. I love this." Cuz it's it's almost like, if I do that over and over and over again, he's going to continue to try to find exterior, you know, affirmation and satisfaction, right? Instead, if he comes to me with a painting, I say, "That looks really cool. Like, why did you use those colors? Like, tell me about it. What's your favorite part about the painting that you did? Like,
Hmm.
wow, you worked really hard." Instead of saying, "You did so well at this painting. You painted this so well. You worked really hard at this painting." And I think that's one,
Yeah.
a very small shift that, I'm hoping will allow him in the future to have that confidence to say, this is my strength. This is what I'm really good at. And I recognize that within myself. And this is where I'm going to have to find those compliments to that strength,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So that's, I think raising kids, that's one thing that I'm really trying to have him have that own conversation in his head about, oh, I think my mom is really going to like this, and try to get that satisfaction and affirmation from people outside of himself, right? Versus not really caring about what they say, and instead, finding out really what he thinks and having a lot of those independent thoughts.
Sure. And then that will the next time he's doing another painting, that those questions go circle back and allow him to put more thought into the next little painting, the next little project, whatever it is.
Right.
Right. So yeah, that I think that's important very much.
Um, Another thing that we do in the household is, when it comes to talking to your kids about money, is we have a gig economy in the house.
Hmm.
Um, and, you know, when my kid turned 3, my husband and I had this conversation about, like, how do we introduce chores into the house? Like, what does that look like? Because I feel like there are a million ways to introduce chores. Some people that, you have a list of chores that you do, and you get a certain amount of money per week, might be $5, right, per week. Um, and you have to do your chores to get those $5. Some people, you have a long list of chores, and maybe I've heard this approach is, you the parents kind of pay over market rate for the chores, but with two stipulations. One is, if you don't do every single one of them, then you get $0. And two, yes, we're paying you above market rate, but that means that you have to put a certain amount of money to either a short term and long term savings accounts. Um, but what we did in our gig economy household is, there are certain chores that we don't really call chores, but that you just have to do, right? Um, you have to clean up after yourself, you bring your plate to the sink, um, you know, you you might help mom and dad with laundry, um, you feed the dog, right? You might do some of these things that just are simple, keep up after yourself,
Right,
right? But then what we also have is we have this whole chart with gigs. And basically whatever is in that chart are chores that provide value to the family. And, there might be, depending on what it is, it might be a quarter, it might be 50 cents. Actually, in there is feeding the dog because that is a value, especially if I have a baby in my hands. I think there's a nickel in there, right? And so what that does is he gets really excited if he he's kind of understanding that money can get him things, and so he's excited to help me put away the dishes, or he's excited to you know weed the garden. He went out and harvested vegetables from our garden, a couple weeks ago, and he came back with this big thing of peppers. And, it's just how can, and I think it's that concept of providing value. You're not going to get paid for, doing your own laundry when you're an adult,
right,
right? So that's one thing I never really wanted to instill. Then there are some families that you don't get paid for anything, but you do everything because it's part of living in the house. And but I think what employees and entrepreneurs, and definitely more so entrepreneurs, their income is based on the value that they give
right.
to clients, to
Hmm.
customers. Employees do that as well. However, I think it's when you're an employee, there's much more flexibility in the amount of value that you can give
Yeah,
with the safety that you still have, right?
right,
Your paycheck, especially if you get to bigger businesses, does not always equate to the value that you give. And that's just the point of it. But what I'm trying to instill in my kids is there are some things that you have to do to be a
member of the family.
member of the family, to be a clean, healthy person, right? And then there are things that provide value to the family, and I want
Yeah,
to reward that.
and it's interesting the way you do it is instead of having a set amount of work for a set allowance once a week, um, the options to him. Here's the things you can do to earn money. The more you do, the more money you get, right? So it's the incentive to do more, right? Okay, if you're getting you have to do these chores and you get $5 a week, then the incentive is to put as little effort as you can into those few chores to get your $5
To
a
get
week.
that same amount of money.
Whereas if he gets the idea that I could do three of these chores a day and I'll wind up with $7 or $8 a week, right?
Yeah.
It's now the incentive is to do the gig work.
And what I'm hoping, and what he does kind of now, is he'll fight me on it. If he hears me open the door to get the scooper for Irving, he'll yell from the
I'll
his
get it
bedroom like, "No, it's my turn. It's my turn." And he'll run and do it, right?
and get his 10
And
cents or
and
a
get
quarter,
his
whatever,
get
for
his
that
10
chore.
cents or
Yeah,
whatever it is. And I think that's what I'm also hoping, that it will almost be a competition on who's going to do the chore for that
right.
day.
And you see that there's an equivalent to that in business where you've got two kind of employee compensation models. One is you get so much a week, right? Here's the job, you get so much a week. And that incentive then incentivizes you to do as little as you can get away with in that week.
Right.
Where you have another compensation model, especially in manufacturing, where you'll only get minimum wage. But on top of that, you get paid piecework on how much you
Or
produce.
sales and
Or
commission.
sales. Sales is
Yeah.
piecework, essentially, right? So if you're shucking oysters or you're shoveling coal or you're, you know, picking peaches, right? You get paid by the bushel that you pick. Well, now you've got an incentive to pick a lot of
And
peaches.
not just that, you have the there's ingenuity behind
Yes,
how you pick
right.
those peaches, right?
All of a sudden, you get really ingenious about how you can pick as many peaches as you can,
And what does that
or
help?
shuck as many. Right.
That also helps the business,
It
right?
helps the
Because
business, and it helps that employee, and it helps other employees that see that employee being industrious and being hardworking is resulting in a much better paycheck. That kind of sets the mindset for the whole workforce.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that is something that I I feel really passionate about too. Just, I want my kids to leave the earth better than how they found it, right? And so no matter what that looks like, whether it's, starting a business that helps a certain demographic or whatever it is, how can they continue to give value? Because that's the other thing. It's value versus hourly rate. And that's something that, I've really transitioned and started thinking about how I price some of our services within the business because, I could easily charge by the hour for the business. But what that does is, we've gotten so efficient at what we do that if we charge by the hour for a lot of our services, we'd actually be get paid less
Less.
now than what we did when we first started when we weren't as efficient, right? And
Well,
so
being paid by the hour drives inefficiency.
it drives inefficiency.
But if you're getting paid for the job, now that drives efficiency,
Right. And
right?
so, I'm thinking about how can I do sales and discuss, Noli roots and what we do in terms of the value that we provide versus the hours that we work. So just other fun things, when trying to translate that to a 3-year-old. But what we also do is, we want to make sure that everything that he earns isn't going directly to his, 197th truck that he owns, right? So when we get to a point where his piggy bank, and it's all cash, right? It's all coins. When we get to the point where his piggy bank is getting pretty full, we then sit down with him, count all his money, right? Give translate it into dollars, and
Mm-hmm.
then we allocate and budget his income
Right.
based on, kind of the three main categories that you think about. One is spending, get something that you really like because you deserve it, because you worked
Mm-hmm.
really hard on this.
Right.
Two is savings, and three is sharing or giving. So, for example, we counted. I think it must have been. I mean, he had maybe $40 out of it, maybe for his birthday money or something like that,
That's a
whatever
lot of
it
money
was.
for a
A
3-year-old.
lot of money for a 3-year-old, but it was about $40 plus whatever he made. So it was probably around $80 that he had, right? Like good amount of
Wow,
cash
that's yeah.
for the gigs that he did and everything. And so what we did, usually when an adult budgets, 50% goes to kind of your fixed expenses, like living expenses. Obviously, kiddos don't have that. We want to encourage this more. So 50% of that 80 went directly to, I think maybe 70, I can't remember exactly what it was, went directly to whatever he wanted. So um we said, hey, we're going to go to Target and you can get whatever you want with this $40. Then we had 30% of the budget go to, I can't remember if it was 30 or 20, which one it was, but let's just say 30% went to savings. So we took $20 and we're going to put it into his, his basically his custodial Roth IRA. Then the other 20% is going to giving. So he really wanted to get Otto a Christmas gift. So when we went to Target and he had his 30 or $40 to buy his own whatever he wanted, and he got the biggest truck and he was super happy, he had this money where he could get Otto a gift. And he chose the gift, he bought it with his own money, and I'm going to wrap that gift with him. And I think that's another thing to help show too, is different ways to kind of spend, save, and give. And and some parents do it differently, right? Some parents, the saving is more like short-term saving, so you save up a big amount of money, then you might have $100 for delayed gratification to get something bigger, right? Some sharing is more like donating, right? Like, where do you want to donate? So parents do it so differently, but I think no matter how you do it, it's teaching them about budgeting as well.
Hmm.
And I have a product idea that, because there is nothing out there on the market that really helps visualize where to put all your money. Um, but that's a big thing that I'm trying to push as well.
But yeah, uh, Tucker and Otto's grandparents, us, my wife and I, we kind of do the same thing in a little different way, as where grandmom will buy them the toys for Christmas. What grandpop gives them is 1 ounce silver bars,
Hmm.
right? They can't spend them, but it's a store of wealth that will grow over time. And it, you know, I inherited a small stack of silver from my parents when, and that my grandfather had saved. And it's a way of instilling in Tucker and Otto. Otto will get his got one when he was born. You'll get another one when he's for his first Christmas. Um, a store of wealth of precious metals, right? That it's not super expensive. It's not an ounce of gold, an ounce of silver, but it's something that as he gets older, I think he'll appreciate what it is more, um, and how valuable it is as a
and
store of
and
gold.
just gives another opportunity for savings, right?
Yeah,
We
it's
in the last podcast episode, we talked about diversifying your savings and your investments, right? Gold, silver, precious
right.
metals. That is certainly a very safe, stable way of
Yeah,
savings.
someone once said to me back in 1933, if you took a $20 gold coin, which was a $20 double eagle, and a $20 bill, and you put them in a drawer, and 60 years later you took them out of the drawer, how much would the $20 bill be worth? $20.
$20.
How much would the $20 gold coin be worth?
More.
About $2,000.
Mm,
All right, that's the difference between saving precious metals and saving fiat money.
hmm. Yeah.
Now, if they had kept the dollar on the gold standard, the dollar would still be worth $20 of
Right.
gold, right?
Right.
But you could buy the equivalent of what you could buy back then with $20 was probably a really nice men's suit,
It's crazy.
right? Well, today a $20 gold piece will buy a really nice men's suit,
Mm,
and more so,
hmm.
because it's a store of wealth, not dollars.
Right.
So that's what I'm building up for their future.
There's an app. Um, I think it's called Family Table, I believe. And I got this idea for the gig economy from this app. The app is really for older kids, kids that probably have their own smartphones, things like that. But um, there are so many ways that you can help your kids visualize what this looks like, whether you open up a custodial Roth IRA with a Vanguard or something for their kids, or you have an app that kind of does the same gig economy, but you can see your accounts grow. I don't know. I think it's all about visualizing
Yes. Yep.
growth, um, and just giving them different modes of receiving and then different modes of giving, and just understanding they are part of the overall economy, right? And how
Right.
can they give value to that?
But it's especially for a child, you want to give them a way of visualizing their little pile of wealth,
Mm-hmm.
right? To us, it's not a whole lot, but to him, it's everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think Kiyosaki said it in his book, is that pile of wealth is your garden, and tend to your garden. Pay attention to it, right? Nourish it, nourishing it by adding more to it over time, right? And if you just have money in a piggy bank and it's up on your drawer, a kid's drawer, he doesn't visualize it, he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
see it. So you've got to have some way to get some biofeedback in to watch, chart how much he's got every month. Okay, so he can see that it's something that is growing in value as opposed to just a piggy bank sitting on his shelf.
Yeah, I love it. Well, thanks.
Well, thank you. I
I
appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no, this is fun little different way of
Yeah,
having chats like this.
yeah. We have chats like this all the time. We just never get
Just
around to
don't record
recording
it.
them.
Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this
Thank you.
episode, please rate and review. It's the best way to get this into the phones and ears and eyes of people who really need to hear this kind of stuff. Also, if you want to be a guest on this podcast, we're really going to start booking guests in 2025. So I would love to hear about you, what you do, why you're interesting and why we should chat. Send me a DM and we can get something on the books. But
And again, this is not professional financial advice. See a professional if you want that.
always. Okay, thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.